For decades, Joel Goldsmith watched students struggle with forgiveness, carrying resentment like chains around their souls. Then he discovered something revolutionary in Christ's teaching about forgiving 70 times 7. This wasn't about the other person at all. It was about your freedom from the prison of judgment. The number wasn't literal. It was infinite release from your own mental bondage. What Joel realized transformed his entire healing practice. When you forgive, you're not pardoning someone's behavior or saying what they did was acceptable. You're releasing the energetic cord that binds you to that painful memory. Every time you replay the hurt, you reinforce your own suffering. Forgiveness is the spiritual surgery that cuts you free from continuous self-inflicted pain. The mystic understood that unforgiveness is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Your resentment doesn't touch them, it only corrodes your consciousness. It blocks the flow of divine grace through you. It keeps you trapped in a past moment, unable to receive the present gift of God's presence. This teaching isn't moral obligation. It's practical spiritual technology for your liberation. Joel discovered that most people misunderstand forgiveness as a single event, like signing a contract. They say the words once and expect the feeling to vanish. But Christ's 70 times 7 reveals a profound truth about consciousness. Forgiveness is a practice, not a performance. Each time the memory returns with its sting, you forgive again. Not because you failed the first time, but because healing happens in layers. Your consciousness has been conditioned over years to react with hurt, anger, or betrayal. These neural pathways don't dissolve instantly. Joel taught that each act of forgiveness weakens the emotional charge attached to the memory. The first forgiveness might reduce the pain by 10%. The second by another 10%. Gradually, through persistent practice, the memory loses its power to disturb your peace. This is why Jesus didn't say forgive once perfectly. He said 70 times 7, acknowledging the reality of how consciousness transforms. It's like washing a deeply stained cloth. One wash lightens it, but complete cleaning requires multiple cycles. Your willingness to forgive repeatedly demonstrates your commitment to your own spiritual freedom over the satisfaction of holding grudges. Joel Goldsmith observed something fascinating in his healing work. The people who couldn't heal physically were often those who couldn't forgive emotionally. There's a direct connection between holding resentment and blocking the flow of life force through your body. Unforgiveness creates energetic knots in your consciousness that manifest as tension, disease, and chronic conditions. Your body becomes the battlefield for your mental warfare. When you refuse to forgive, you're essentially saying that your right to judge is more important than your peace, your health, your joy. You're valuing the story of your victimhood over your present well-being. Joel would ask his students a powerful question. How much of your life force are you willing to sacrifice to prove someone wrong? The cost of unforgiveness is always higher than your ego wants to admit. The practice of forgiving 70 times 7 trains you to value freedom over being right. Each forgiveness is a choice to reclaim your energy from the past and invest it in your present consciousness. It's not weakness. It's the ultimate power move. You're declaring that no person, no event, no circumstance has the authority to keep you imprisoned in suffering. You alone hold the key to your cell. Here's what Joel discovered that revolutionized his understanding. The person you need to forgive most isn't necessarily the one who hurt you. It's often yourself. You're angry at yourself for trusting them, for not seeing the warning signs, for being vulnerable, for not protecting yourself better. The outer forgiveness is important, but the inner forgiveness is essential. You must forgive yourself 70 times 7 for being human. This self-forgiveness breaks the cycle of shame that keeps you repeating painful patterns. When you condemn yourself for past choices, you lower your consciousness to the level where those experiences occur. Forgiveness raises your vibration back to wholeness. It doesn't erase what happened, but it releases the emotional charge that keeps attracting similar circumstances. You stop being a vibrational match for betrayal when you forgive the betrayer within. Joel taught that complete forgiveness includes everyone involved, including yourself and even God. If you've been angry at the divine for allowing your suffering, this comprehensive release creates space for grace to flood your consciousness. You're not just forgiving an action, you're forgiving the entire situation, seeing it as part of your spiritual curriculum rather than your destruction. This shift changes everything. Joel once worked with a woman named Sarah who'd been betrayed by her business partner 15 years earlier. She lost everything financially and rebuilt her life, but the resentment remained like a low-grade fever in her consciousness. Every business decision was filtered through fear of betrayal. She couldn't fully trust anyone, which meant she couldn't fully succeed. Her unforgiveness was costing her more than the original betrayal ever did. Joel guided her through the 70x7 practice. At first, she resisted, saying the partner didn't deserve forgiveness. Joel gently reminded her this wasn't about deserving, it was about her freedom. They worked together for 3 months. Some days, she'd forgive once. Other days, she'd need to forgive 20 times as memories flooded back. Gradually, the emotional intensity diminished like a fire running out of fuel. 6 months into the practice, something shifted. Sarah realized she no longer thought about the betrayal daily. When the memory did surface, it felt distant, like a story about someone else. More importantly, her business began thriving in ways it never had before. She could trust her intuition again, partner with others, take healthy risks. The forgiveness didn't change what happened, but it completely changed what was happening now in her life. Another student, Michael, struggled with forgiving his father for decades of emotional abuse. Joel explained that forgiveness doesn't require reconciliation or even communication with the person. It's an internal release that happens in your consciousness regardless of the other person's awareness, presence, or even their life or death. You're not waiting for them to apologize or change. You're changing your relationship to the memory itself. Michael practiced daily, and for weeks nothing seemed to shift. He felt like a failure at forgiveness. Joel reassured him that the practice was working beneath the surface, like seeds germinating underground before any green shoot appears. The key was persistence without measuring results. Forgiveness isn't about feeling better immediately. It's about commitment to freedom over time. Trust the process even when you can't see the progress. After 2 months, Michael had a dream where he saw his father as a wounded child, acting from his own unhealed pain. This perspective didn't excuse the abuse, but it dissolved the personal offense. His father wasn't attacking him specifically, he was reacting from his own suffering. This recognition broke the energetic cord between them. Michael woke up feeling lighter than he had in 30 years. The practice had worked its magic in his subconscious mind. Joel also encountered students who used forgiveness as spiritual bypass, pretending everything was fine while suppressing their authentic feelings. This false forgiveness is actually another form of imprisonment. You're not releasing the pain, you're denying it exists. True forgiveness acknowledges the hurt fully before releasing it. You must feel it to heal it. Trying to forgive before processing the pain is like trying to heal a wound without cleaning it first. The 70x7 practice allows space for this honesty. The first several times you forgive, you might still be angry, and that's acceptable. You're training your consciousness toward freedom while respecting where you actually are emotionally. Joel taught that authentic forgiveness has a quality of softening, not hardening. If your forgiveness feels rigid or forced, you're probably operating from willpower rather than genuine release. The distinction is crucial for your spiritual integrity. Willpower says, I should forgive, so I will ignore my feelings. Genuine forgiveness says, I acknowledge this hurt deeply, and I choose to release my attachment to it for my own liberation. One is suppression dressed as spirituality. The other is transformation through conscious choice. Joel always emphasized working with your actual consciousness, not your ideal consciousness. The most profound shift Joel witnessed came from a woman who'd lost her child to a drunk driver. For years, her entire identity became the grieving mother consumed by rage. Forgiveness seemed impossible, even obscene. How could she forgive such devastation? Joel didn't push, he simply asked, how much of your remaining life are you willing to sacrifice to your anger? Your other children need a present mother, not a ghost consumed by the past. This question pierced her consciousness. She realized her unforgiveness wasn't honoring her lost child. It was preventing her from fully loving her living children. She began the practice with excruciating difficulty. Some days she could barely whisper one forgiveness. Other days she'd rage and cry for hours before attempting it. Joel reminded her that willingness is enough. You don't need to feel forgiving. You only need to be willing to work toward it. Over 18 months, a miraculous transformation occurred. She found peace without betraying her child's memory. She could honor the grief while releasing the consuming rage. She started a foundation in her child's name, turning tragedy into service. The forgiveness freed her to create meaning from the meaningless, to transform her pain into purpose. She became truly alive again, which was the greatest tribute she could offer to the child she lost. If these transformation stories inspire you, like this video to help others find these teachings, subscribe for more Joel Goldsmith wisdom, and comment. What healing journey resonated most with you? Beyond the emotional practice, Joel taught specific techniques to support the 70x7 process. The first is the consciousness of impersonalization. When someone wrongs you, they're not acting as their true spiritual self. They're acting from their conditioned, wounded ego. The person you need to forgive isn't really them. It's the false self operating through them. This distinction allows you to separate the person from the behavior. Joel would guide students to visualize the person surrounded by divine light, seeing past their actions to their spiritual essence. This doesn't justify harmful behavior, but it removes the personal offense. You recognize that hurt people, and everyone is doing the best they can from their current level of consciousness. When you see this clearly, forgiveness becomes easier because you're not taking their actions as a personal indictment of your worth. The practice looks like this. When the memory arises, pause and say, I forgive the wounded consciousness that acted through this person. I release my attachment to this experience. I am free, and I recognize their spiritual innocence beneath their human mistakes. Repeat as often as needed. Some days you'll need this once, other days 70 times. Trust that each repetition is loosening the energetic grip of resentment on your soul. The second technique Joel emphasized is the practice of substituting love for judgment. Every time you catch yourself mentally rehearsing the offense, consciously replace that thought with a blessing for the person. This feels impossible at first, even hypocritical. But Joel taught that you're not blessing their actions, you're blessing their being. You're affirming the divine presence within them, calling forth their highest self rather than reinforcing their lowest behavior. This practice actively rewires your neural pathways from reaction to response. Initially, you might manage this substitution once out of every 100 thoughts. That's perfect progress. Over weeks and months, the ratio shifts. Eventually, the blessing becomes more automatic than the resentment. You're literally reprogramming your consciousness from a frequency of attack to a frequency of grace. This is advanced spiritual technology disguised as simple forgiveness. Joel used this technique himself when students or colleagues disappointed him. Instead of indulging irritation, he'd silently speak to their divine consciousness, blessing them with clarity, wisdom, and peace. He noticed that this practice not only freed him from negativity, but often the other person would spontaneously shift their behavior without any outer confrontation. Your change in consciousness changes the entire relationship dynamic energetically. The third practice is what Joel called the meditation of release. Set aside 15 minutes daily in quiet contemplation. Bring to mind the person or situation requiring forgiveness. Don't push the feelings away. Let them surface fully. Feel the anger, the hurt, the betrayal in your body. Notice where it lives as tension, tightness, or pain. Then consciously breathe into those areas, imagining divine light dissolving the emotional density with each exhale. As you breathe, silently repeat, I release this to the divine. This is no longer mine to carry. I am free from this now. You may need to repeat this hundreds of times in one session. That's the 70x7 in action. You're not trying to force a feeling of forgiveness. You're creating the conditions for organic release. Some days you'll feel lighter afterward. Other days nothing seems to shift. Continue anyway. Trust accumulates beneath awareness. Joel emphasized that this meditation works with your body's wisdom, not just your mind's intention. Unforgiveness is stored in your cellular memory, your nervous system, your energetic field. By bringing conscious breath and attention to where you hold the pain physically, you're releasing it at the somatic level. This creates lasting transformation rather than temporary mental agreement to forgive. Your whole being participates in the liberation process. The fourth technique combines journaling with the forgiveness practice. Write a letter to the person you're forgiving, not to send, but to release. Pour everything out honestly without editing or spiritualizing your feelings. Express your rage, your hurt, your sense of betrayal completely. This isn't about being nice, it's about being real. Let the page hold what your consciousness can no longer carry. Some students write dozens of these letters over months. After you've emptied all the pain onto paper, write a second letter from your highest self. This letter offers forgiveness, not from obligation, but from recognition of your shared humanity. Acknowledge that everyone makes mistakes from their level of consciousness. Express your choice to release the burden of judgment for your own well-being. This doesn't excuse their actions, but it frees you from the prison of perpetual resentment. Finally, ceremonially release both letters. Some students burn them, others bury them. Some tear them into pieces and scatter them in water. The physical act of destruction symbolizes the energetic release you're creating in consciousness. Joel taught that ritual engages your subconscious mind powerfully, making abstract forgiveness concrete and final. Your whole being witnesses the release, and transformation deepens through this multisensory commitment to freedom. Despite these powerful practices, Joel acknowledged that students encounter predictable obstacles in the forgiveness journey. The first major challenge is the ego's investment in victimhood. There's a perverse comfort in being the wronged party. It gives you moral superiority, it justifies your struggles, it earns sympathy from others. Forgiveness requires releasing this identity, which can feel like losing yourself entirely if you've built your life around your wounds. Joel compassionately confronted this pattern when he saw it. He'd ask, "Who would you be without this story? What scares you more, staying in suffering or discovering joy?" These questions reveal how we sometimes prefer familiar pain to unknown peace. The ego fears that forgiveness means the other person wins, that your pain didn't matter, that you'll be vulnerable to future hurt. None of this is true, but the fear feels real. The way through this obstacle is recognizing that your value doesn't depend on your victim status. You're worthy of love, respect, and good treatment because of your divine nature, not because of what was done to you. Forgiveness doesn't diminish your experience. It honors it by refusing to let it define your future. You're too valuable to spend your precious life maintaining grievances. Your freedom matters more than your story. The second major obstacle is the fear that forgiveness equals condoning harmful behavior. Joel clarified this misconception repeatedly. Forgiveness is not saying what happened was acceptable, not inviting repeated harm, not staying in dangerous situations. You can forgive completely while maintaining firm boundaries, ending toxic relationships, and even pursuing legal justice where appropriate. Forgiveness is an internal release, not an external reconciliation requirement. Many students confused forgiveness with resuming relationship as if nothing happened. Joel taught that wisdom sometimes requires distance, even after forgiveness. You release the emotional charge while honoring the practical reality that some people aren't safe for you. Forgiveness frees you from resentment, but boundaries protect you from repeated harm. Both are expressions of self-love and spiritual maturity, not contradictions. The distinction is crucial for your safety and sanity. You can bless someone from afar, wish them well spiritually, release all judgment, and still never speak to them again. Forgiveness happens in your consciousness regardless of their presence in your physical life. Joel himself maintained healthy distance from certain individuals, even while holding no personal offense in his heart. Spiritual freedom and practical wisdom walk hand in hand. The third obstacle is impatience with the process. Students often expect that after forgiving once or even 70 times 7 times in one session, the issue should be resolved forever. When the hurt resurfaces days or weeks later, they feel like failures. Joel reminded them that consciousness healing doesn't follow linear time. Memories are triggered by unexpected events, smells, songs, places. Each trigger is another opportunity to practice, not evidence of spiritual inadequacy. He compared it to physical healing. If you cut your finger deeply, you don't expect it to heal instantly. You clean it, bandage it, protect it, and gradually new tissue forms. Some days it hurts more than others. Eventually, it heals completely, leaving perhaps a small scar as a reminder, but no longer causing pain. Emotional and spiritual healing follows the same organic process. Your impatience doesn't accelerate healing. Your patience creates conditions for natural restoration. The 70 times 7 teaching anticipates this reality. Christ knew that forgiveness isn't one and done. It's a practice that accompanies you through the healing journey, however long that takes. Instead of judging yourself when you need to forgive again, celebrate your willingness to continue the practice. Each forgiveness is a victory, not a failure. Persistence is the path to freedom, and you're walking it perfectly even when it feels imperfect. The fourth challenge is forgiving without receiving an apology or acknowledgement. The other person may not think they did anything wrong, may have died, may be unreachable or unsafe to contact. Your ego wants validation, wants them to admit they hurt you, wants justice or at least recognition. Joel taught that waiting for these things before forgiving is giving your power away completely. You're making your freedom dependent on someone else's consciousness shift. True forgiveness is unconditional, meaning it doesn't require any conditions to be met. The other person doesn't need to know, care, or change for you to be free. This is the ultimate spiritual maturity, releasing your need for them to validate your experience. You validate your own experience. You honor your own pain. You give yourself the acknowledgement you're seeking from them. This self-validation is incredibly powerful and healing. Joel worked with many students whose offenders never apologized, and they still achieved complete freedom through the forgiveness practice. One woman forgave her deceased father, who never admitted his abuse. She realized she was waiting for a ghost to free her when she held her own keys all along. The moment she stopped requiring his admission, she stepped into her power. Your liberation never depends on another's participation. It depends only on your choice. If these challenge-breaking techniques speak to your heart, like to support this content, subscribe for advanced spiritual practices, and comment. Which obstacle are you ready to transform now? As you advance in the forgiveness practice, Joel taught more subtle applications. One profound area is forgiving God or the universe for your suffering. Many spiritual seekers carry hidden resentment toward the divine for allowing tragedy, illness, loss, or injustice in their lives. This creates a barrier between you and grace thicker than any interpersonal grievance. You're essentially at war with reality itself. Joel gently brought this unconscious anger to light in his students. He'd ask, "Are you angry that God didn't protect you? Do you feel abandoned by the universe?" The honest answer was often yes, buried beneath spiritual platitudes. This divine unforgiveness manifests as inability to surrender, constant need to control, difficulty receiving help, or feeling perpetually unsafe in existence. You can't relax into life when you fundamentally distrust the intelligence behind it. The practice here is acknowledging your anger at the divine directly. Stop pretending you're fine with God's will when you're actually furious about how life unfolded. Joel encouraged students to have honest conversations with God, expressing all the rage, confusion, and hurt. The divine can handle your authentic feelings better than your fake acceptance. This honesty opens the pathway to genuine forgiveness of existence itself, which creates profound peace. Another advanced application is forgiving life for not meeting your expectations. You had a vision of how things should have unfolded, the career you'd have, the relationship you'd find, the health you'd enjoy, the recognition you'd receive. When reality delivered something different, part of you stopped participating fully in the life you actually have. You're grieving the life you didn't get while missing the gifts in the life you did get. Joel called this the forgiveness of disappointed dreams. It's subtle but powerful. You must release your attachment to how you thought things would be to fully embrace what is. This doesn't mean abandoning healthy goals, but it means making peace with the present moment even while working toward change. You forgive life for being life, messy and unpredictable and often different from your plans. The practice involves gratitude for what is rather than fixation on what isn't. Each time you catch yourself comparing your reality to your expectations, pause and find 3 things to appreciate about your current circumstances. This trains your consciousness to find treasure in the terrain you're actually walking, rather than constantly wishing you were somewhere else. This forgiveness of reality itself is tremendously liberating and often opens unexpected doors. Joel also taught the forgiveness of collective wounds, ancestral pain, cultural trauma. Sometimes the unforgiveness you carry isn't even personally yours. It's inherited from your lineage or absorbed from your community. You're carrying grudges that belong to your great-grandparents. Resentments passed down through generations like heirlooms of suffering. This unconscious burden weighs heavily on your consciousness, without you understanding why you feel so angry about things that didn't happen directly to you. The practice here requires acknowledging what you've inherited. Sit quietly and ask, what pain am I carrying that isn't mine? What anger belongs to my ancestors? Let the answers surface without judgment. Then consciously forgive on behalf of your entire lineage. Say, I release all ancestral unforgiveness. I free my family line from resentment. I am the generation that breaks this chain. This declaration shifts energy, not just for you, but backwards and forwards through time. Students reported profound shifts from this practice. One man realized his rage toward authority figures was actually his grandfather's unprocessed anger at injustice. Once he forgave on behalf of his lineage, his own relationships with bosses transformed completely. You're not just healing yourself through forgiveness, you're healing your entire ancestral line. The spiritual benefit ripples through generations in both directions. This is forgiveness as a sacred healing power. The most advanced forgiveness practice Joel taught is the present moment release. Instead of waiting until you're wounded to practice forgiveness, you cultivate a consciousness that doesn't take offense in the first place. This is Christ consciousness, where you see everyone acting from their highest available understanding in each moment. You recognize that judgment itself is the wound, not the external action. When you stop judging, there's nothing to forgive. This doesn't develop overnight. It's the fruit of years practicing forgiveness. Eventually, your consciousness becomes so identified with your divine nature that personal offenses can't stick. Someone's rudeness, dishonesty, or betrayal is immediately seen as their suffering, not your injury. You feel compassion rather than anger, concern rather than resentment. This isn't spiritual bypassing, it's genuine transcendence of the personal self. Joel embodied this consciousness increasingly as he matured spiritually. Students would test him with provocations, and he'd respond with such impersonal love that they'd see their own ego in contrast. He wasn't trying to be saintly. He simply lived from a consciousness that knew his identity as infinite divine being couldn't be threatened by anyone's temporary confusion. This is the ultimate freedom forgiveness creates, liberation from the tyranny of taking things personally at all. As you approach mastery of the forgiveness practice, Joel taught that your entire life becomes a meditation on release. Every moment presents micro-opportunities for forgiveness. The driver who cuts you off, the clerk who's rude, the family member who disappoints, the friend who forgets your birthday. These small daily irritations are your training ground for consciousness transformation. Handle these minor offenses with immediate forgiveness, and major wounds won't accumulate. This continuous forgiveness prevents the buildup of resentment that calcifies over years into bitterness. You're living in real-time release, not allowing anything to stick in your consciousness long enough to create energetic knots. Joel compared it to washing dishes immediately after eating versus letting them pile up for weeks. Fresh forgiveness is easy. Old hardened unforgiveness requires intense scrubbing. Stay current with your forgiveness practice. The way you practice this daily is through awareness. Notice when irritation arises, even subtle annoyance. Instead of indulging the story about why you're justified in feeling irritated, immediately forgive and release. You don't need to make a big production of it, just a quiet inner statement. I release this, I'm free, I forgive. This takes seconds, but saves you from accumulating toxic energy that will eventually require intensive forgiveness work to clear. Joel witnessed the ultimate transformation in students who embraced forgiveness as their spiritual identity. They became instruments of grace in the world, naturally extending mercy because they lived in it themselves. Their presence was healing because they carried no judgment. People felt safe around them, could be authentic without fear of condemnation. This is the gift your forgiveness practice gives not just to you, but to everyone you encounter. This transmission of forgiveness consciousness is subtle, but powerful. You don't preach about forgiveness, you embody it. Your energy field radiates acceptance and release. People in your presence find themselves spontaneously forgiving old wounds because your consciousness invites theirs upward. This is how spiritual transformation spreads, not through teachings but through presence. You become a living demonstration of what freedom from resentment looks like. Joel emphasized that this isn't about becoming perfect or never feeling hurt. Even at this level of consciousness, you'll have moments of disappointment, frustration, or pain. The difference is these feelings move through you quickly rather than lodging in your system. You feel them fully, but don't build identity around them. They're weather passing through your sky, not the sky itself. This fluidity is the hallmark of advanced forgiveness consciousness. The practical outcome of sustained forgiveness practice is a life of increasing ease and joy. Energy previously locked in resentment becomes available for creativity, love, and purpose. Your relationships deepen because you're not defending against past hurts. Your health improves as chronic tension releases from your body. Opportunities appear because your vibration attracts matching circumstances. Forgiveness is the most practical spiritual practice for transforming your entire life experience. Joel saw countless examples of this transformation. Students who'd been stuck for decades suddenly made quantum leaps in their lives after clearing old resentments. Jobs manifested, relationships healed, health issues resolved, financial abundance flowed. This wasn't magical thinking, it was energetic reality. When you free up massive amounts of life force previously devoted to maintaining grievances, that energy has to go somewhere. It goes into creating the life you actually want. The key is consistency without attachment to outcomes. Practice forgiveness because it's your commitment to freedom, not because you're trying to manipulate reality for specific results. The benefits come as natural byproducts of a consciousness no longer bound by resentment. Trust that as you clear the inner obstacles, the outer path reveals itself. Joel promised his students that persistent forgiveness practice would transform their lives. And it did. It will transform yours too. So here's your complete path forward with Joel Goldsmith's teaching on forgiving 70 times 7. Begin today with one person, one situation that still carries emotional charge. Commit to forgiving as many times as needed over the coming weeks and months. Use the techniques shared here: impersonalization, substitution of love for judgment, meditation of release, journaling, and ritual. Be patient with yourself and trust the process. Remember that forgiveness frees you, not the other person. Every act of release is an act of self-love and spiritual maturity. You're not condoning harmful behavior. You're choosing peace over perpetual pain. You're reclaiming your energy from the past to invest in your present and future. This is your birthright as a divine being. Freedom from the prison of resentment. Walk through the door that forgiveness opens. Joel's final word on forgiveness was this: make it your daily spiritual practice, not a one-time event. Live in a consciousness of continuous release, immediately forgiving small irritations before they calcify into major wounds. Become a presence of grace in the world by embodying the freedom you wish to experience. Your forgiveness heals not just you, but everyone you touch. This is your contribution to elevating collective consciousness. If your spiritual understanding expanded through these Joel Goldsmith secrets, like this video, subscribe for more transformative teachings, and comment, "I am transformed," to confirm your new path.
Beloved, the voice of the Christ within is not far away, nor is it hidden from those who seek it with a sincere heart. It speaks in the silence, in the stillness that lies beneath the noise of the mind. To hear it, one must first turn from the clamor of the outer world and rest in the quiet sanctuary of the soul. For the Christ does not shout, it whispers, and only the attuned ear can perceive its gentle word. The first step is receptivity. You must be willing to listen without demand. Let your prayer be not a plea, but an openness, an empty cup waiting to be filled. Silence the questioning, the striving, and let the infinite speak through the calmness of your being. When you stop asking for signs and instead become still, revelation begins to flow like a clear stream from an unseen spring. The second step is acknowledgement. Recognize that the Christ within is already present. It does not need to be summoned or created. It is the living presence, eternal, complete, and radiant within you. Each time you remember this, the veil of separation grows thinner, and the inner light becomes more discernible. The third step is communion. Withdraw your thought from the outer world, not as an escape, but as a return to your source. Sit quietly, breathe softly, and feel the rhythm of life moving within you. Do not think about God. Rather, let yourself be in God. This is the sacred meeting place where human thought dissolves and divine awareness rises. The fourth step is trust. Do not doubt the reality of what is unseen, even when no word is spoken, even when the silence seems empty. Trust that the presence is there, guiding, teaching, unfolding. The inner voice is often softer than thought, yet more powerful than reason. The fifth step is expression. Let the awareness of the Christ flow through your words, your deeds, your compassion. For the voice you hear within seeks manifestation without. As you live in harmony with this presence, it will speak through your kindness, your patience, your peace. And then, in a holy moment, you will know that you and the Christ are one. There is no longer a listener and a voice, only the infinite speaking to itself in the language of love. Receptivity opens the door to spirit. True hearing begins in stillness and surrender. One must release striving and allow divine wisdom to flow naturally into a quiet, receptive heart. The Christ presence is already within. The divine voice is not something to be sought outside, but recognized as the eternal living presence already dwelling in the soul. Communion transcends thought. Connection deepens when one moves beyond intellectual prayer into silent communion, being in God rather than thinking about God. Trust the unseen guidance. Faith in the invisible is essential. Even in silence, the divine is actively guiding, teaching, and transforming the consciousness from within. Expression manifests the inner voice, the true evidence of hearing. The Christ within is revealed through daily living in love, gentleness, patience, and peace expressed outwardly. Receptivity is the sacred threshold through which the divine voice enters the human consciousness. It is not achieved through effort, nor through the strain of mental pursuit, but through a quiet yielding of self. The mind, so accustomed to doing, fixing, analyzing, must learn to be still, to rest in a state of open awareness, where thought no longer seeks control. In this stillness, a deeper intelligence begins to move, one that is not born of intellect, but of spirit. To be receptive is to create space within, to make room for the infinite to express itself without obstruction. When one is truly receptive, there is no expectation, no agenda. The soul waits in peace, not asking, "What shall I receive?" but rather, "What would the divine have me know?" It is an act of surrender, a gentle release of personal will. Many approach prayer or meditation as a means to acquire guidance, healing, peace, but receptivity is not acquisition. It is the awareness that all these things already exist in the presence, and that by quieting the self, we allow them to unfold naturally. Like the ocean tide that comes unbidden, the spirit flows in when resistance subsides. The noise of the world, both outer and inner, is the greatest barrier to receptivity. The mind chatters about yesterday's regrets and tomorrow's fears, creating a fog that clouds perception. To hear the still, small voice, one must enter the inner chamber and close the door, not a physical door, but the door of mental activity. In that sanctuary of silence, thought becomes transparent, and what remains is awareness itself. It is here that the Christ within speaks, not in words, but in the subtle language of peace. Receptivity is cultivated by love for the presence. It cannot be forced, but it can be invited through devotion. When the heart longs not for results, but for communion, the divine voice answers effortlessly. Imagine a flower turning toward the light. It does not struggle to bloom, it simply receives. So too, the soul opens in the warmth of divine love, and revelation blossoms naturally. This love dissolves fear, for where love is, resistance cannot stand. And in the absence of fear, the Spirit moves freely through consciousness. It is often believed that hearing the divine voice requires some mystical talent or heightened state of spirituality. Yet the truth is simple. Every soul possesses the capacity to hear. What differs is the level of receptivity. The voice of the Christ is ever present, but only those who are inwardly still can perceive its whisper. Just as radio waves fill the air but require a tuned receiver to be heard, the divine message surrounds us, waiting for a heart attuned to silence. The process is one of alignment, not effort. The more we rest in stillness, the clearer the signal becomes. To be receptive also means to trust. The mind may question the silence, "Why do I hear nothing?" Yet the Spirit speaks even in quiet. The communication of the divine is not always through words or visions. Sometimes it is an inner knowing, a peace that surpasses reason. Trust allows us to remain open even when no answer seems to come. It teaches patience, the willingness to dwell in silence without demand. In that patient waiting, understanding unfolds, not as a sudden flash, but as a gradual illumination of consciousness. Practicing receptivity in daily life transforms ordinary moments into sacred ones. When we pause before speaking, when we listen deeply to another without judgment, when we move through the world aware of divine presence in all things, we are living receptively. The Christ voice does not speak only in meditation. It speaks through intuition, through the quiet prompting to act with kindness, through the inspiration that arises unbidden in the heart. To be receptive is to live in a continuous awareness that every breath may carry a divine message. Receptivity demands humility. The ego, with its need to be right, to control, to understand, must step aside. For the divine cannot be heard through arrogance or fear. It reveals itself to the meek and pure in heart. When we admit, "I do not know, but I am willing to be shown," we place ourselves in the position of the listener. The Christ consciousness responds to such openness as sunlight responds to the dawn. The light has always been there, only the night of self-concern obscured it. There is a rhythm to divine communication, a movement of giving and receiving. Receptivity allows this rhythm to flow unhindered. Just as the lungs expand to take in air and contract to release it, so the soul receives inspiration and then expresses it in thought, word, and deed. To hold on to what we receive is to block the current. To share it freely is to remain in harmony with divine flow. Thus, receptivity becomes not a passive waiting, but a living participation in the life of spirit. In this way, the soul learns to listen without strain, to wait without anxiety, to know without proof. The more we surrender our need to control the process, the more naturally the inner voice is heard. Receptivity is not a state we achieve once and for all, but a way of being cultivated moment by moment, a quiet attentiveness to the divine that is forever whispering within. The Christ within is not something to be discovered as though hidden in a distant place, nor something to be attained through years of seeking. It is the eternal presence of God that has never departed from you, the divine essence that lives, moves, and breathes as your very life. The great illusion of humanity is separation, the belief that we stand apart from our source. Yet the truth is that the presence has never been absent. It abides within the heart of every being, waiting only for recognition. To acknowledge the Christ within is not to invite something new into existence, but to awaken to what has always been. This inner recognition begins with stillness, for only in silence can one perceive what words cannot convey. The Christ does not come through sound or vision, but through awareness, the deep realization that I and the Father are one. The mind, accustomed to duality, seeks God as something outside, in temples, scriptures, and teachers. Yet the sacred mystery is that the same light which illumined the saints and prophets burns quietly within every soul. The moment we turn inward and acknowledge its presence, even in a whisper of faith, the veil of separation begins to thin, and peace enters like a soft dawn. To recognize the Christ within is to shift from doing to being. The world teaches that spiritual growth is achieved through effort, through striving, learning, or purification. Yet the divine self does not grow or change. It is already complete. The work lies not in becoming divine, but in realizing that we already are. This realization is not born of pride, but of humility, for it acknowledges that there is nothing of ourselves that is good except that which flows from the infinite. The ego says, "I will find God." The spirit answers, "You cannot find what has never been lost." Acknowledgement transforms consciousness. When you pause throughout the day to remember, the Christ is here, within me, within all, you invite divine awareness into every activity. Washing dishes, walking through a crowded street, or speaking with another, each becomes a sacred act when performed in remembrance. This awareness dissolves judgment, for if the Christ is in all, how can one condemn? It softens the heart and opens the eyes to the beauty that is hidden beneath appearances. Every person you meet becomes a reflection of the same light you carry, and every circumstance, no matter how ordinary, becomes an altar where divine presence reveals itself. The Christ within is not bound by religion, creed, or tradition. It transcends every doctrine and belongs to no name. It is the universal essence of life, the Word made flesh in every being. To acknowledge it is to rise above the narrow walls of belief and enter the boundless realm of spirit. You begin to see that holiness is not confined to sacred places or hours, but fills the very air you breathe. This understanding brings freedom, for no longer do you depend on outer conditions to feel the presence of God. The divine is where you are, as you are, in this very breath. In moments of sorrow or confusion, remembrance of the Christ within becomes a healing balm. When the outer world crumbles, when human strength falters, turn inward. There, beneath the turmoil, lies a still center, untouched by pain or fear. This is the Christ, the unshaken core of peace that no circumstance can destroy. To dwell in that awareness is to live from the foundation of eternal safety. The storms may rage around you, but the center remains calm, radiant, and sure. Every time you return to that awareness, you strengthen your connection to divine reality and weaken the illusion of separation. Acknowledging the Christ within is an act of faith that matures into knowing. At first, it may be a concept repeated in thought, but with persistence, it becomes a living experience. As you rest more often in inner stillness, the awareness grows not as an emotion, but as a subtle certainty. You begin to sense that every heartbeat is an echo of divine rhythm, every thought illuminated by a higher intelligence. The Christ becomes not an idea, but the very consciousness by which you live, move, and perceive. This recognition naturally extends to others. When you behold another not as a struggling human personality, but as the living expression of the same divine life, you begin to love without condition. Compassion arises not as effort, but as the spontaneous response of truth, recognizing itself. You can no longer hate, for hatred would be self-denial. You can no longer fear, for fear cannot exist where unity is known. Thus, the acknowledgement of the Christ within becomes the foundation of peace in relationships, in communities, and in the world. To live in constant remembrance of the inner Christ is to walk through life with a quiet radiance. You no longer need to seek signs, for the presence itself becomes your guide. You act, not from human reasoning, but from divine inspiration that flows naturally when you are aware of your oneness with God. Every need is met, not through outer striving, but through inner alignment. You become a transparency for divine love to express itself not as something you do, but as what you are. The Christ within, once acknowledged, becomes the silent teacher, the comforter, the light that never fades, revealing through you the eternal harmony of the infinite. Communion is the sacred art of resting in the presence until there is no longer a sense of I and thou, but only the still awareness of being. It is not communication in the sense of words or thoughts exchanged between two beings. It is the merging of consciousness with its divine source. To enter this communion, one must move beyond the limits of intellectual prayer and allow the heart to become the altar where the infinite meets the finite. It is in this interior stillness that the true relationship between the soul and God is realized not as separation bridged by devotion, but as unity revealed through silence. The beginning of communion often feels like quiet, waiting. The mind, restless by nature, may struggle against the stillness, seeking to fill it with petitions or affirmations. Yet communion is not about asking or affirming, it is about being. The more one strives to create an experience, the further it slips away. The key is surrender, a gentle letting go of mental activity, a release of every effort to reach God. When the thoughts subside and the emotions quiet, awareness opens like a flower to the light. In that openness, the divine makes itself known, not as something outside, but as the very life within. In true communion, there is no longer the sense of a person seeking something greater. There is only the awareness that life itself is speaking, listening, and being through you. It is a silent recognition that every breath, every heartbeat, is an expression of the Infinite One. Prayer becomes not words, but stillness. Meditation becomes not thought, but being. This is the moment when time stands still, and eternity reveals itself as the present. In this sacred awareness, the soul experiences its natural state, peace without opposite, joy without cause, love without object. Communion is not achieved through human discipline but through divine grace. Yet grace is drawn to humility. When the heart bows inwardly and confesses its helplessness to reach God through effort, the divine presence rises like a tide. It is as though the moment you cease to seek, the beloved steps forward. The presence that seemed distant reveals itself to have never been apart. You realize that the separation existed only in thought, not in reality. The soul does not travel to meet God. It awakens to the truth that it has always been within God. The experience of communion cannot be forced, but it can be invited. One invites it through love, through the pure desire to be still and to know. When you sit in silence, not for reward, not for guidance, not for peace, but simply to rest in the awareness of the divine, the veil begins to lift. In that sacred quiet, there is no asking and no answering, for the two have become one. The language of communion is not speech but silence, and within that silence there is understanding more profound than words could ever convey. In daily life, communion can become a continuous state. It is not confined to moments of meditation or solitude. It can be carried into every act, walking, working, listening, loving. When you remember that the presence is within and around you, life itself becomes prayer. Every encounter becomes an opportunity to recognize the divine shining through form. Even the simplest tasks take on a quiet holiness, for they are done in awareness of the eternal presence. This is the essence of living communion, a consciousness so awake to spirit that no moment is apart from God. Communion dissolves fear, for fear arises only in the sense of separation. When you know yourself to be one with the infinite, what remains to fear? The heart becomes anchored in peace, untouched by the shifting conditions of the world. Even in the midst of outer turmoil, you can rest inwardly in the silence that never moves. That silence is not emptiness, it is fullness, alive with the substance of spirit. It holds you, sustains you, renews you. It becomes the secret place of the Most High, where no evil can touch and no sorrow can abide. Through communion, guidance unfolds naturally. It does not come as a command or a voice from without, but as a gentle impulse within a knowing without thought. The mind, when purified of noise, becomes the clear mirror through which divine wisdom reflects. Decisions arise effortlessly, for they are not born of reasoning but of intuitive clarity. In this way, the soul becomes the instrument of divine will, acting not from compulsion, but from inner harmony. Every movement, every word, every silence carries the fragrance of divine order. As communion deepens, one begins to sense that God is not something to reach, but something to reveal. The more one abides in stillness, the more transparent the self becomes, allowing the light of spirit to shine unobstructed. Life becomes a living prayer, not spoken, not thought, but lived. And in this state, you discover the highest truth, that there was never a need to find God, for you were never outside of the divine. Communion is the unveiling of this eternal oneness, where the listener and the speaker are the same, and the silence itself is the voice of God. Trust is the invisible bridge between human uncertainty and divine assurance. It is not born of logic, for logic demands proof, and spirit gives only knowing. To trust the unseen guidance is to rest in a faith that transcends reason, a quiet conviction that even when all appearances suggest absence, the presence is working, unfolding, and directing all things toward good. This trust does not mean blindness. It is the vision of the heart, the perception that senses harmony where the eyes see chaos. The human mind longs for control. It measures safety by predictability, and it fears the unknown. Yet the divine path cannot be measured, for it moves beyond the limits of human planning. When we surrender control and lean upon the inner presence, we step into a current that knows its own direction. The river does not ask the stone for permission to flow. It moves with power and grace toward the sea. So too does divine life move through us when we cease to resist. Trust is the letting go of resistance, the willingness to be carried by a wisdom greater than our own. At first, this trust feels like stepping into darkness. The senses offer no proof, and the mind trembles in uncertainty. But as we persist in quiet confidence, something begins to shift. We start to perceive a subtle order, a pattern of grace working beneath the surface of events. Circumstances that once seemed random reveal purpose. Delays become protection. Disappointments turn to blessings. Each moment of surrender deepens our awareness that nothing in divine law is wasted or misplaced. All unfolds in perfect rhythm, though we may not yet see the full design. Trust grows through experience. Each time we follow an inner prompting, that gentle nudge of intuition, and witness its wisdom, faith strengthens. The Christ within whispers softly, never demanding, always guiding. And as we obey these quiet impulses, confidence blossoms. We begin to see that the voice within never leads to harm, never contradicts peace, never fails to sustain us. In moments when logic cries out for control, the Spirit's whisper says, "Be still, I am here." To trust is to obey that whisper, to act upon peace rather than fear. The practice of trust calls for patience, for divine timing is not human timing. The mind, anxious for results, demands quick answers. The Spirit unfolds truth like dawn, gently, gradually, in its appointed hour. Impatience clouds hearing. trust clears it. When we wait in serenity, we align with the rhythm of the infinite. Just as the seed must rest in darkness before breaking into light, our understanding must often rest in silence before revelation appears. In this resting, we learn that faith is not believing that everything will go as we wish, but knowing that everything will go as it should. To trust the unseen guidance is to cultivate inner listening. This means turning from the clamoring voice of the world to the still, steady tone of spirit. The outer world is filled with noise, opinions, fears, urgencies, but the divine voice speaks only in calm assurance. It never argues or shouts, it simply is. When we quiet our inner turmoil, we discover that the guidance we sought was never absent. It was drowned out by the noise of our own anxiety. The more we rest in silence, the more clearly we hear that still small voice saying, "I am the way." This trust also demands courage, the courage to follow inner direction even when others do not understand. Divine guidance often leads through paths unseen by reason or approved by society. Yet the soul that trusts the presence walks in quiet confidence, unmoved by outer judgment. For such a one knows that the inner voice speaks from a wisdom that cannot err. The Christ within never leads to confusion, only to deeper peace. Therefore, if a direction arises from stillness, carries no fear, and leaves the heart tranquil, it may be followed, even if it contradicts human expectation. Trust brings freedom. The more we rely upon the inner presence, the less we are bound by fear of loss or failure. We cease to live by appearances, by what others do, or by what circumstances suggest. Instead, we live by grace. The need to control outcomes fades, replaced by a quiet assurance that all things are held in divine order. This freedom allows love to flow without fear, action to arise without tension, and service to be offered without expectation. Life becomes effortless, guided not by personal will, but by the invisible hand of spirit. In time, this trust matures into knowing. We no longer say, "I hope God will guide me," for we have seen that guidance in every breath, every turn, every silence. The unseen becomes the only reality worth trusting. We recognize that divine wisdom operates ceaselessly, regardless of our awareness. Even when the path seems uncertain, the presence remains unfailing, guiding each step toward fulfillment. To trust this unseen guidance is to rest in the heart of life itself, to walk through the mystery of existence with serenity, knowing that every moment, seen and unseen, is carried by the eternal love that never errs. Expression is the natural flowering of divine awareness. When the Christ within has been heard, felt, and trusted, its radiance cannot remain hidden. It seeks to move through thought, word, and deed, transforming every ordinary moment into a living expression of the presence. To hear the inner voice is sacred. To live, it is holiness. The divine does not speak only for our comfort or understanding, but that it might manifest through us, that its love, wisdom, and peace may find form in the world. Expression, therefore, is not performance or effort. It is the spontaneous outpouring of inner realization into visible life. When one begins to live from this inner awareness, actions take on a quiet grace. There is no strain to be good, no deliberate attempt to appear spiritual. The Christ within expresses itself effortlessly, like fragrance from a flower or light from a flame. It does not struggle to shine, it simply is. The individual who abides in this awareness becomes a transparency for divine qualities. Love flows naturally into kindness, wisdom into right action, peace into calm strength. What once required discipline now arises as joy, for the motive has shifted from self to spirit. Expression begins in consciousness. Before any act or word, there is the silent knowing of oneness. In this awareness, there is no separation between the inner and outer, between meditation and living. The same presence that speaks in stillness, acts through the hands, walks through the feet, speaks through the lips. The individual becomes an instrument, but not a passive one, rather, a conscious partner in creation. This is the true meaning of letting God live through you. You no longer think, "What should I do?" Instead, you rest inwardly and allow the divine impulse to move you. Each action becomes an expression of divine will, not by command, but by inner harmony. To express the inner Christ is also to embody compassion. When awareness of unity deepens, the suffering of another can no longer be viewed as separate from oneself. Compassion becomes the natural language of spirit. It may express through a gentle word, a silent prayer, a helping hand, or simply a listening heart. Every expression of kindness becomes an act of divine service, for it reveals the love that flows ceaselessly within all creation. In this way, expression is not limited to outward deeds. Even the attitude of the heart radiates blessing. Living in expression also means living truthfully. The Christ within cannot dwell in hypocrisy or fear. To express divine life, one must have the courage to be authentic, to speak truth in love, to live integrity quietly, and to let the inner voice guide even when it leads against convention. The divine does not ask for pretense or piety, only sincerity. When one is inwardly aligned with the presence, truth becomes effortless. Words carry power, not because they persuade, but because they are rooted in the authority of spirit. Such words heal, uplift, and restore, for they are not human opinions but divine utterances clothed in human sound. Expression also manifests as peace. The one who lives in awareness of the Christ radiates calm wherever they go. Even without words, their presence brings comfort, for it carries the vibration of the infinite. Like still waters reflecting the sky, the peaceful soul mirrors divine serenity to the world. This peace does not depend on outer harmony. It remains unshaken amid turmoil. It is the silent testimony of realized truth, the living proof that God is here, now, within all things. Through this peace, others are drawn to their own inner stillness, and the circle of divine expression expands. To live as an expression of the inner voice is to surrender personal ambition. The ego seeks recognition, spirit seeks revelation. The Christ within does not desire to be admired, but to be made known. It uses the individual as a vessel through which divine love flows to all. When self-interest fades, the heart becomes open, and divine abundance begins to move freely. Giving and receiving become one act, for what is shared from spirit returns multiplied. This law of divine expression ensures that nothing given in love is ever lost. It is absorbed into the eternal rhythm of givingness that sustains the universe. Expression must also be constant. The inner voice does not speak for moments of prayer alone, but for the entirety of life. Every word, every action, every thought is an opportunity to reveal the divine nature. This constancy is not effortful but natural for one who abides in awareness. Whether facing challenge or joy, success or failure, the same peace flows forth. The outer world may change, but the inner source remains steady. Through such constancy, one becomes a channel of blessing, a living sermon of love without words. In expressing the Christ within, life becomes service, not as duty but as delight. Each day becomes an unfolding of divine creativity, a chance to reveal more of the infinite through the finite. The heart that lives in this awareness no longer seeks reward or recognition, for it has found fulfillment in being a vessel of grace. The voice once heard in silence now sings through every gesture of love, every quiet act of understanding, every breath of peace shared with the world. And so, in the quiet sanctuary of your own being, the journey returns to its beginning. the realization that the voice you sought has always been speaking, not in thunder or command, but in the gentle pulse of life itself. The Christ within is not a visitor. It is the eternal presence that lives, breathes, and moves as your very existence. To hear, it is to awaken to your true identity, to know that the divine and the human are not two, but one. Let the 5 steps become not a method, but a rhythm, the natural movement of spirit within you. Be receptive, that the stillness may open. Acknowledge the presence, that illusion may fade. Enter communion, that silence may reveal its fullness. Trust the unseen, that peace may lead your path. And express the light, that the world may glimpse through you the beauty of the infinite. Each moment you live in awareness of this inner voice, the ordinary becomes sacred, and the fleeting becomes eternal. You will find that there is nothing to attain, nothing to prove, for all that is divine already abides within. Simply listen, simply rest, simply allow, and the Christ within will speak through your heart in words unspoken, guiding your days with a wisdom that never fails and a love that never ends. Have you ever felt completely powerless while watching someone you love suffer, desperately wishing you could do something, anything to bring them relief? Or perhaps you've faced your own health crisis, praying with everything in you for healing, only to feel like your words evaporate into empty air, met with nothing but silence. What if I told you that the very act of reaching outward for healing power is the exact thing preventing you from becoming the healing channel you were created to be? For years, maybe even your entire life, you've been taught that healing comes from somewhere outside yourself. You've been conditioned to look up toward the heavens, to seek sacred spaces, to wait for intermediaries who can somehow bridge the gap between your desperate need and God's healing touch. You've been trained to believe that divine healing power is reserved for the specially chosen, the extraordinarily faithful, or those who somehow manage to pray hard enough, long enough, or purely enough to finally break through to the other side. Has this ever happened to you? You're sitting beside a hospital bed, watching someone you care about struggle with pain, and you feel this crushing weight of helplessness. Or maybe you're the one dealing with physical symptoms that won't respond to treatment, and you've prayed until your voice goes hoarse, begged until tears won't come anymore, only to wake up the next morning to the same unchanging reality. In those moments, a terrible question starts whispering in your mind. Am I doing something wrong? Is God even listening to me? Am I simply not worthy of being used as a healing vessel? But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. Here's the truth that changes absolutely everything. The healing presence you've been desperately seeking in all those external places has been residing within your own consciousness this entire time, waiting patiently for you to stop straining outward and start recognizing inward. The greatest spiritual tragedy of our generation isn't that God has withdrawn healing power from the world. It's that we've fundamentally misunderstood where that power actually dwells and how it flows through ordinary people like you and me. What you're about to discover might completely revolutionize not just how you pray for healing, but how you actually become a conduit through which divine healing energy flows to touch the lives around you. Stay with me until the end of this teaching, because the 5 sacred shifts we're exploring today aren't complicated mystical practices requiring years of training or special spiritual gifts. They're simple, profound adjustments in awareness that have helped thousands of people awaken to their identity as healing channels. People who discovered that the kingdom of healing isn't a distant destination, but a present reality waiting to express itself through their very presence. The transformation begins the moment you understand why you've been looking in the wrong direction all along, and how a simple reorientation of your spiritual awareness opens the floodgates to healing power you never knew you were capable of channeling. This revolutionary truth stands in stark contrast to everything conventional spirituality has taught you. The I Am healing presence, that divine consciousness that Jesus spoke of when he said, "The kingdom of heaven is within you," has been broadcasting continuously from within your own awareness this entire time. It hasn't been hiding. It hasn't been testing your dedication or waiting for you to become worthy enough. It's been there, steady and constant, like a radio frequency that never stops transmitting, waiting only for you to tune your inner receiver to the right channel. This isn't just another spiritual technique to add to your collection of prayers and practices. This is a fundamental shift in perception that transforms the entire way healing flows through your life. Think about what your journey has looked like up until this moment. You've been taught that divine healing power is something you achieve through effort, something you earn through discipline and dedication, something that requires you to try harder, pray longer, be more faithful, more pure, more spiritually advanced. But here's the hidden truth that changes everything. Healing consciousness isn't something you build through striving. It's something you awaken to through recognition. The impact of this single revelation can't be overstated. When you grasp that healing energy isn't flowing toward you from some distant divine source, but rather through you from an infinite wellspring within, your entire relationship with sickness, pain, and suffering transforms. Imagine what your days would look like if you woke up each morning already connected to this healing stream, not hoping today might be the day you finally break through, not wondering if you'll be spiritually aligned enough to help someone in need, but simply recognizing what has always been present, what has never stopped flowing, what is your birthright as a divine being. Picture yourself walking into a room where someone is suffering, and instead of feeling that familiar helplessness, you experience a quiet knowing that healing presence is already moving through you. Envision facing your own health challenges not with the crushing weight of fear and desperation, but with access to an inner clarity so certain that anxiety becomes almost irrelevant. This isn't wishful thinking or positive affirmation. This is the actual lived experience that becomes available when you stop reaching outward for healing power and start recognizing the infinite reservoir within your own consciousness. Now, I want to go even deeper into what makes this transformation so accessible, because the real beauty of this truth is its simplicity. The mindset shift required isn't complicated or esoteric. You don't need decades of meditation practice or theological training. You don't need to become someone different or achieve some advanced spiritual status before you're qualified to be a healing channel. The journey begins with small, repeated decisions to turn your awareness inward rather than outward, to recognize rather than strive, to allow rather than force. Behind the scenes of every genuine healing breakthrough is this foundational recognition. The divine healing intelligence that created your body and sustains every cell within it is not separate from you. It is the very essence of your being, the I Am presence that existed before you were born and will continue beyond your physical form. If you're beginning to sense that this isn't just information, but an invitation to step into your true identity as a healing channel, write in the comments, "I recognize the healer within." The first sacred shift happens the moment you stop straining and start recognizing. This sounds almost too simple, doesn't it? Everything you've ever been taught about accessing divine healing involves exhausting effort. You've been told to pray harder, fast longer, confess more thoroughly, believe more intensely. You've been carrying this crushing weight of spiritual performance, thinking that if you could just do enough, be enough, sacrifice enough, then maybe, just maybe, you'd finally become worthy of channeling God's healing power. But here's the hidden truth that liberates you from this exhausting cycle. Divine healing energy isn't something you earn through spiritual achievement. It's something you tune into through awareness. Think of it like this. Right now, countless radio signals are passing through the room where you're sitting. Music, news, conversations, all of it moving through the air around you, invisible but completely present. Your inability to hear those signals doesn't mean they're not there. It simply means your receiver isn't tuned to the right frequency. The same principle applies to healing consciousness. The divine healing presence isn't playing hard to get. It isn't testing your dedication or waiting for you to prove yourself worthy. It's broadcasting continuously, a constant stream of life-giving energy that never stops flowing. The only real question is whether you've adjusted your inner awareness to receive it. I create these videos for seekers ready for genuine transformation. If this resonated with you, subscribe and join this community exploring practical ways to experience divine healing consciousness in everyday life. This transformation in mindset changes everything about how you approach your days, especially those first precious moments when you transition from sleep to waking. Your morning holds extraordinary power that most people completely overlook in their rush to grab their phone and dive into the demands waiting for them. But what if those initial seconds could establish the healing consciousness through which your entire day unfolds? Before your feet touch the floor tomorrow morning, before you reach for anything external, pause for just a breath and silently acknowledge this truth. The kingdom of healing is within me right now. This divine health is my true nature. These aren't magic words or empty affirmations designed to manipulate reality into conforming to your wishes. They're recognition statements that align your awareness with what has always been true. You're not creating healing presence through this practice. You're simply tuning your consciousness to receive the frequency that's already broadcasting. The impact of this simple morning ritual extends far beyond those initial seconds. You're establishing a foundational mindset that becomes the lens through which you experience everything that follows. That health concern you've been worried about, you approach it from a different foundation. That person in your life who needs healing, you interact with them as a channel rather than a helpless bystander. The physical symptoms that usually trigger immediate panic, you respond from a deeper place of spiritual grounding that allows wisdom to emerge beyond fear's static. The journey of becoming a healing channel isn't about adding complicated practices to an already overwhelmed schedule. It's about these small, consistent decisions to return your awareness to what's already present. Behind the scenes of every remarkable healing testimony is usually this simple, repeated recognition, sometimes dozens of times throughout a single day, that divine healing consciousness is your true nature. Not something you need to achieve, but something you need to remember. If this shift from straining to recognizing feels like relief washing over your spirit, write in the comments, I choose recognition over effort. What's fascinating about this journey is that the transformation doesn't require the dramatic intensity most of us have been conditioned to pursue. We live in a culture absolutely obsessed with breakthrough moments, with those life-changing peak experiences that supposedly flip everything upside down in a single instant. You've probably tried this approach yourself, waiting until things get desperate, then throwing yourself into hours of intense prayer, hoping that sheer force of will and emotional intensity will finally crack open the heavens and unleash healing power. But here's what actually creates lasting transformation. 5 minutes of healing presence practiced consistently every single day will reshape your consciousness far more profoundly than occasional marathon sessions driven by crisis and panic. Your spiritual receptors don't respond well to dramatic overhauls and desperate surges of energy. They're much more like a musical instrument being tuned, requiring gentle, consistent adjustments that gradually bring you into perfect alignment with the healing frequency of the I am within you. Think about anything meaningful you've ever developed in your life. Did any skill, any relationship, any deep understanding ever happen overnight? The things that truly reshape us unfold through accumulated small decisions, through showing up day after day even when immediate results aren't visible, through trusting the process when everything in our instant gratification mindset screams for faster progress. This is where the practice becomes beautifully practical in your everyday existence. Throughout your day, you encounter countless moments that either reinforce old fear-based patterns or create new pathways for healing consciousness to flow. These decision points happen so quickly you might not even notice them unless you're paying attention. When you feel that first twinge of pain or notice an unusual symptom in your body, you have approximately 3 seconds before your conditioned response kicks into full gear. 3 seconds before panic floods your nervous system, before worst-case scenarios start spinning through your mind, before you completely disconnect from the healing presence within and spiral into pure reactivity. But within that brief window lies extraordinary power. Even 30 seconds of consciously returning to inner healing consciousness creates sacred space for divine clarity to emerge beyond what your physical senses are reporting. You're not denying the symptom or pretending nothing's happening. You're accessing a deeper reality that holds wisdom your fear-constricted mind simply cannot perceive. This same principle applies when you're with someone who's suffering. That moment when you first see their pain, you have a choice point. Will you immediately join them in fear consciousness, reinforcing the very frequency that blocks healing flow? Or will you use that sacred pause to anchor yourself in the recognition that divine healing presence is flowing through you right now, regardless of what physical appearances suggest? The impact of these brief returns to healing awareness compounds over time in ways that can seem almost miraculous to outside observers. Behind the scenes, you're training your consciousness to default to presence rather than panic, to rest in divine knowing rather than human worry. Each time you choose that 30-second pause, you're literally rewiring the neural pathways and spiritual receptors that determine how healing energy moves through your being. If you've experienced even one moment where pausing to recognize healing presence shifted how you responded to a health challenge, write in the comments, "The pause changed everything." The second sacred shift emerges precisely in those moments that feel most terrifying, when physical symptoms show up in your body and every instinct screams at you to panic. Your conditioned response follows such a predictable pattern. The moment you notice something wrong, fear floods your entire system before you've even made a conscious decision about how to respond. Your spiritual awareness completely shuts down, replaced by exclusive focus on material solutions, worst-case medical scenarios, and the overwhelming feeling that your body has somehow betrayed you. But what if these very moments, the ones that feel most threatening, are actually invitations to experience healing consciousness at its most profound? The transformation happens when you train yourself to turn within first, before allowing panic to hijack your nervous system. In that initial moment when symptoms appear, you pause and recognize this truth. In the kingdom of heaven within me, there is only wholeness and divine perfection. This isn't about denying physical reality or refusing appropriate medical care. It's about creating sacred space where God's healing voice can speak clearly, offering guidance that remains completely inaccessible when fear dominates your awareness. You're establishing a foundation of spiritual truth before engaging with material circumstances, which fundamentally changes how healing unfolds. Now, I want to reveal something that might surprise you about how deeply interconnected your healing journey is with other areas of your life. The third sacred shift addresses what many people discover, but few talk about openly: the way financial stress and health concerns become entangled in a vicious cycle that blocks healing flow. Think about what happens when unexpected medical expenses arrive at the same moment you're already struggling financially. The fear intensifies exponentially. You're not just worried about your health anymore. You're simultaneously terrified about how you'll pay for treatment, whether you can afford to miss work, what will happen if this condition persists. This combined stress creates such intense static that divine healing guidance becomes virtually impossible to hear. The hidden truth behind this struggle reveals something revolutionary about how healing actually works. From the kingdom perspective, that dimension of consciousness where divine intelligence operates, substance of every kind, including healing energy itself, is infinite and omnipresent. Your actual experience of health isn't determined solely by external medical conditions or material circumstances. It's primarily a reflection of your consciousness, the frequency you're broadcasting from deep within. When you approach illness from scarcity mindset, convinced that healing resources are limited and you might not get your share, you're literally constricting the channels through which divine healing flows. But when you recognize that healing energy is as unlimited as God's own nature, something shifts in how your body responds. This doesn't mean you ignore practical financial planning or refuse to address real medical needs. It means you're bringing healing consciousness to practical matters, allowing spiritual wisdom to inform material decisions, rather than letting material panic override your connection to divine guidance. Behind the scenes of many remarkable healing stories is this fundamental shift. The moment someone stopped making health decisions from fear and scarcity and started accessing the unlimited intelligence that sees possibilities their anxious mind cannot perceive. If you're beginning to see how your mindset about abundance and limitation affects your physical healing journey, write in the comments. Healing flows from within. The fourth sacred shift reveals something most people never consider about the healing journey. It's not just about receiving healing for yourself, but becoming a channel through which divine healing flows to others. This transformation happens when you begin recognizing that same I am presence, not only within yourself, but within every person you encounter. Your most challenging relationships suddenly become the very places where healing consciousness gets to demonstrate its reality. Think about that difficult person in your life right now, the one who triggers frustration or hurt every time you interact with them. Your conditioned response is to focus on what's wrong with them, how they need to change, why they're making your life harder. But here's the hidden truth that revolutionizes everything. The catalyst for healing in relationships isn't finding perfect people or waiting for others to transform first. It's learning to approach every interaction from kingdom awareness, accessing divine wisdom about how to be a healing presence, regardless of how the other person is showing up. When you walk into a room carrying healing consciousness, something shifts in the atmosphere, even before words are spoken. You're not trying to fix anyone or force change through willpower. You're simply allowing the divine presence within you to recognize itself in them, creating space where healing can unfold naturally. This doesn't mean conflicts magically disappear or people suddenly become who you want them to be. It means you're responding to relationship challenges from an entirely different foundation, one that holds the possibility of healing even in the midst of difficulty. Now, I want to explore something that amplifies this healing awareness exponentially. As your consciousness deepens through these practices, you'll discover that seeking authentic spiritual community becomes not just helpful, but essential. There's a phenomenon that happens when multiple people gather with shared commitment to healing presence that's difficult to explain but unmistakable when you experience it. The collective field that forms when even 2 or 3 people practice kingdom awareness together creates an amplification effect that makes divine healing guidance far more accessible than when you're working alone. Think of it like acoustic resonance. Certain physical spaces are designed to amplify sound naturally. Concert halls, cathedrals, amphitheaters. The same note played in an empty field versus inside one of these structures sounds completely different because the environment itself enhances the sound. Spiritual community works similarly. When you're surrounded by people who understand healing consciousness, who are also learning to recognize the divine presence within themselves, the revelations come more easily. Insights emerge more clearly. The transformation that might take months of solitary practice can sometimes unfold in moments within authentic fellowship. This doesn't mean you need to join formal religious organizations or abandon existing connections. Sometimes the most powerful spiritual community happens around kitchen tables, in living rooms, through honest conversations with even one other person who shares your commitment to being a healing channel. Behind the scenes of many remarkable healing breakthroughs is this simple reality. We awaken more fully together than we ever could in isolation. The impact of practicing healing presence alongside others creates momentum that carries everyone forward in ways individual effort alone cannot achieve. If you're sensing that finding your spiritual community could accelerate your journey as a healing channel, write in the comments, "I'm ready for authentic fellowship." The 5th sacred shift transforms one of the largest portions of your waking life, your work. For most people, their professional environment feels completely disconnected from anything spiritual. The pressure of deadlines, difficult personalities, and performance expectations creates such intense stress that divine presence seems like a distant concept that has no practical application in the real world. But what if your workplace isn't separate from your healing journey at all? What if it's actually one of the primary arenas where you get to practice being a healing channel? Imagine approaching your professional life not as mere employment you endure to pay bills, but as sacred expression of the healing consciousness within you. That project deadline that usually triggers anxiety becomes an opportunity to demonstrate calm presence in the midst of pressure. That colleague who consistently pushes your buttons becomes a chance to let divine peace flow through you, responding from kingdom awareness rather than reactive frustration. You're not trying to change your job or escape to something more spiritual. You're bringing healing consciousness to whatever work you're already doing, and the transformation in how you experience those hours is remarkable. The impact extends far beyond just feeling better about your job. When you approach professional challenges from healing awareness, you access unlimited intelligence that operates beyond the stressed, constricted thinking that dominates most workplaces. Creative solutions emerge naturally. You find yourself handling difficult situations with wisdom that surprises even you. Behind the scenes, you're becoming a stabilizing presence that affects everyone around you, often in ways you'll never fully see or measure. Now, I want to reveal what happens as this healing consciousness matures through your consistent practice of these sacred shifts. You discover something that goes beyond any specific benefit or breakthrough, an authentic peace that doesn't depend on circumstances being perfect. This isn't the artificial calm that comes from temporarily having everything under control, or the fragile positivity that shatters the moment challenges arise. It's a foundational tranquility that transcends whatever physical symptoms you might be facing, whatever health concerns are present in your life or the lives of people you love. The hidden truth here is profound and life-changing. When you establish yourself firmly in healing consciousness, what you access isn't just guidance about specific decisions, though that certainly flows more clearly. What emerges is a deeper reality, an unshakable anchor of peace that remains steady regardless of what your body is experiencing or what the medical reports are saying. Health concerns still warrant appropriate attention and care. You're not ignoring symptoms or refusing treatment, but you're no longer consumed by anxiety about outcomes. You're no longer paralyzed by fear of what might happen. Divine healing guidance flows with remarkable clarity when your consciousness isn't constantly clouded by worry and panic. You make better decisions about treatment. You hear your body's wisdom more accurately. You recognize which voices to listen to and which fears to release. The journey isn't about guaranteeing specific physical outcomes. It's about discovering that the kingdom of healing within you provides a stability that external circumstances simply cannot shake. If you've tasted even a moment of this peace that transcends your circumstances, write in the comments, "Peace flows from kingdom consciousness." Now, I want to be completely honest with you about what this journey actually demands, because the transformation we're talking about requires something that challenges everything our instant gratification culture has taught us. This pathway to becoming a healing channel isn't a weekend workshop that produces immediate enlightenment or a 21-day challenge that permanently shifts your consciousness. The reality is that some people begin practicing these sacred shifts and experience remarkable healing breakthroughs within weeks. They see tangible changes in their health, witness unexpected recoveries, feel the unmistakable flow of divine healing energy moving through them in ways that leave no doubt something profound has shifted. Others work diligently for months, showing up every single day to recognize healing presence, practicing these pauses, returning again and again to kingdom consciousness and the visible. Changes take longer to manifest. The decisive factor here isn't spiritual talent or some kind of divine favoritism where God chooses to bless certain people and not others. It's simple persistence, the willingness to continue even when immediate results aren't obvious, trusting that each moment you return to healing awareness creates subtle adjustments in your consciousness that are preparing you to receive and channel divine healing more clearly. Think about the most meaningful transformations you've experienced in any area of your life. Did any of them actually happen overnight? Real change, the kind that fundamentally reshapes how you operate in the world, almost always unfolds through accumulated small decisions rather than singular dramatic moments. Behind the scenes of what looks like sudden healing breakthrough is usually months of these quiet, consistent practices. Countless small choices to recognize rather than panic, to pause rather than react, to trust divine intelligence rather than surrender to fear. The mindset shift required here goes against everything we've been conditioned to expect. We want instant results, immediate proof, tangible evidence that our efforts are working. But consciousness unfolds according to its own natural timing, and your role is to create optimal conditions through consistent practice rather than demanding specific outcomes on your preferred timeline. Each recognition, each sacred pause, each moment you align with healing presence is like tuning a musical instrument, small adjustments that gradually bring you into perfect resonance with divine healing frequency. Now, I want to reveal something beautiful that happens as you persist on this journey. Your personal awakening to healing consciousness naturally creates impact that extends far beyond your individual experience. As you practice channeling God's healing presence more clearly through these sacred shifts, something shifts in how you show up in the world. You become a living example that quietly inspires others without you even trying or intending to teach them anything. Your calm in the midst of health challenges demonstrates a different way of being that people notice even when they can't quite articulate what's different about you. The ripples of your transformation spread in directions you'll never fully see. A colleague watches how you handle a difficult diagnosis and begins questioning their own automatic panic response. A family member notices your transformed approach to pain and physical limitation, sensing there's something you've accessed that they haven't yet discovered. If you're willing to commit to this journey, regardless of how long visible transformation takes, write in the comments, "I trust the process." If you've stayed with me through this entire journey, you're exactly the kind of person this message was meant to reach. There's something in you that's already awakening to these truths, already recognizing the healing presence that's been speaking within you all along. That recognition is what brought you here, and it's what's going to continue guiding you forward as you step more fully into your identity as a healing channel. I create these videos for people like you, seekers who are ready to move beyond surface-level spirituality into genuine transformation, who want to experience God's healing presence not as theory, but as lived reality. If this teaching resonated with something deep inside you, I'd love for you to subscribe and join this community of people who are learning to let divine healing flow through them in everyday life. Each video we create together explores practical ways to become clearer channels for healing consciousness, translating profound spiritual truths into steps you can actually implement starting today. If this message felt like it was speaking directly to your heart, if you sense these 5 sacred shifts are the pathway you've been searching for, write in the comments, "This message was meant for me." Your story might be exactly what another person needs to hear to begin their own journey of awakening. There's real power in acknowledging these truths out loud, even if it's just through a few typed words. It's a way of saying yes to the healing consciousness that's stirring within you. And if you found value in what we explored today, if even one insight shifted something in your awareness, consider tapping that like button, not for algorithms or numbers, but as a quiet acknowledgement between us that this conversation mattered, that these truths still have power to transform lives in our anxious, hurting world. There's a video right here that builds beautifully on everything we've discussed today. It shows you how to maintain this healing awareness, even when circumstances seem to contradict everything we've explored about divine presence. Click and continue with me over there as we go deeper into living as healing channels in a world that desperately needs what flows through awakened consciousness. Until we meet again, remember, the healing presence of the I Am is within you right now, closer than your breath, waiting only for your recognition.